Hello, welcome back to Laser Cut and Fly RC Models. I'm the Laser Model Guy. What I want to do today is carry on creating the components for the KeilKraft AJAX on Lightburn. In the previous video we created all of the components for the wing, and in this video what I want to do is create the components for the fuselage and the tailplane, all ready to send straight across to the laser so we can make our own kit. Let's go! Okay, so looking at the fuselage then, we've got our side view and we've got our plan view, or our plan from above, and what I noticed straight away is how the nose or the front end of the aircraft curves in from when you look at it from above. Now our motor that we're going to use is going to be mounted around here, and that motor is 27 millimeters in diameter and 30 millimeters in length. So if we need some clearance on the diameter, obviously. So what I'm going to do is make a square that is 30 by 30. I'll just change the colour of that so that we can see it when it's on the plan. So 30 by 30. And if we just drop that in, what we can see is that is how big the motor is going to be. Now I think the motor will come to around here, because we want the propeller to be where the propeller would have been. And of course we've got the spindle coming out of the front of the motor, and then on the front of that we have the spinner with the prop. So if we put the motor about there, that'll be about right. In fact, what we can do just to help us is we'll put a centre line in on the whole thing. So if we just come from here and we go back to there, we can make that our centre line. And if we just zoom in a little and we go to nodes, we can alter this node by pressing Control and Shift, and then we can take it up or down. I think that is right on that little centre dot there. And then if we come to the back, if we grab that node and then press Control and Shift, we can just take that down slightly until it is bang on that centre point there, that little centre spot. Okay, so we've now got a centre line to work with. Now the battery that I'm going to use is a LiPo 2 cell. It is 35 millimeters in width and it is 100 millimeters long. So if we make a shape that is 45 by 100, and more or less that is the size of the space we're going to need in there for our battery. Now I think the battery is going to need to sit around there, which is just forward or centering on the front of the wing, because you know, we'll want to make sure that we're not tail heavy, and when we put our servos and such in, we just want to make sure that we're able to put that where we want it. Now the other thing is our battery compartment will make it quite long, so we've got the option of moving the battery forward or back to get our centre of gravity right. And then once we've done that, we'll be able to mark it up so that we always get our battery in the right place. Now what I would like at the front here, where the motor sits, I'd like some clearance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to straighten out this curve, and I'm going to bring that more or less forward with just a slight incline towards the centre. So the nose will be a little bit like the nose of the simple cub that you see from time to time, where you've got it's just slightly more parallel than this is here. And the only reason I'm converting it that way is to give us the space for our motor, our ESC, etc. So a couple of small alterations there. So with that in mind, what I want to do is I'm going to sheet the side of the nose, and I'm going to sheet it from this former here, fuselage former 1. So that part there is going to be sheeted in 1/8 balsa. So with that in mind, in order to get the shape of that, what I'm going to do is just quickly make a line that is the size of this fuselage former. I'll just go to nodes and we will just expand that up to the outer edge of that. Now while we're on nodes, if we hover over that line and we press A, it will immediately correct itself and make sure that it's absolutely perpendicular. So if I take that shape and I bring it forward and I sit it straight on our centre line there, if we remained parallel, that is how wide our nose would be. I don't want to do that, so I want to bring it in a bit, but still leaving us with plenty of room for our motor to sit and for us to get access to the motor, and also wide enough for us to build our formers around our our battery when we get back here a bit. If we give ourselves 10mm either side of our motor, that will take that down to 50. So if we go to 50 on that and we centre that on our centre line, we can now make a shape using our line tool. We can make a shape from front of this former down to our corner and then back to the front of this former and then back up. If we just go to nodes and we just zoom in here, you'll see that we haven't quite connected those. There you go. Okay, so from the top, that is going to be what the new profile will look like. And the reason I've done this, I've drawn this in, is so that when we make formers to go forward and a former to hold the motor, etc., which will be just here, we'll be able to use this shape to create our our sizes. So with that in mind, what I want to do is just offset this now, because this will be our 1/8 balsa sheeting on the side of the aircraft there. So what I'll do is I'll offset that by 3.2mm inward, and what we've got now is when we're coming down the sides, we'll be able to make formers that will fit inside that, because that sheeting will will need to accommodate the formers. So if I select the outer line, control and select the inner line, and then group, and then group those, I know that that shape will now stay exactly where it is. I'll just change the layer of our battery and of our motor, just so that we can so there's a little bit of definition there, so we can see what's what. Maybe change the centre line as well. Okay, so all we've done there is we've made a framework so that we're able to build our formers. Okay, so I'll start by making the side panel here for this nose section, or for the side of the nose section. So what we'll do is, in the first instance, we want it to be level with this top shape here, so that it covers the motor, and I'll show you what that looks like in just 1 second. So first things first, if we just have a straight line And then if we go to nodes, and I'll just show you what I meant earlier. If we were slightly off and we hover above this and we click A, it'll bring it to perpendicular. So what I want to do with that is just set it against the front of our shape there, just that we know how far forward to come with making this section, or this side section. So I'll just take our line tool, select a different colour, so we just follow around our shape on the outside edge, and we're a little bit over there, but we'll correct all these just before we finish. I'm going to come down the front of this former, but we will be putting small tabs in to connect in, and I'll show you how we do that in a little while. So come up to there, and we reach that line, and then we come up to the top and we snap that onto there. Right, so that's the general idea. What I'm going to do now is just go to nodes. I'm just going to correct this one here. So I just select that node and then press Control and Shift. I can bring that down until it's on the line. And the rest don't seem too bad. Okay, and then if we just take this shape out of the main plan and go back to nodes, what we want to do is we want to convert each of these to smooth curve nodes. So just hover over them and convert them. I've left the end ones for now, and I'll show you what I'm going to do with those. So when we come off there, we can see that our shape now is nice and smooth, nice and uniform, and if we bring it down, it fits nicely, and we can check that, just Control Shift, we can shift that about until we're in the right place. And you can see how well that now fits. So that is going to be a perfect shape for the side. There's one more thing I want to do with it though, and that is if we use our radius tool, and our radius at the moment is set to 5. Let's see if we can make that a little bit bigger. Go to 10, and we'll just put a radius on there and a radius on there. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, we might make that radius a little bit bigger. Let's make a radius of, say, 15, and we'll see what that looks like. So we take our radiuses off. We've now gone to a radius of 15, and we'll try that. And I think that looks better, yeah. So if we just drop that back on, we can see what we've got. Just move it into place. And I think that's quite nice. So the sides will have a curve on, and there'll obviously be a gap in between the two sides where the motor sits. Next, we want to have a look at what we're going to do with this former. Well, for me, the former is going to be made, this former and this former will be made out of ply. These forward formers will also be made out of ply because we'll be fitting the battery box in amongst these ones here. So what I'm going to do is just make a couple of small shapes, and they will be 25 high, and they will be 3.2 wide. And then what I'm going to do with that is I am going to copy, create another one, and then I'm going to, they're now superimposed. So if I press Control and just go down, what I will do is if I make a third one of those, and then what I can do is just bring that down like that, bring this one up till it meets. Now if I take the second one away, and then all I want to do with those is group them, and then I'll make a copy or a couple of copies, and then all I want to do with those is bring them across, and I'm going to put them on the center of our former there. And then if we grab our shape as well and just bring them both over to the side, what we can do, we just make sure that they are absolutely on that line. If we just stretch those over slightly, then ungroup, we can then get our snipping tool and we can take away anything that we don't want. And what we'll find now is we've got a shape there that we will be able to cut into our former, and then the former and this end or this side sheeting will knit together nicely. But I'll show you how all that works in just a little while, because what I want to do first is just come back here and we'll realign ourselves with our shape, and I think we're not far off. And what we want to do now is, using these, we can also put a couple of slots into our side panel that will then allow us to key in the former that comes in the center there. So I press Control and I can then group that, and then so I'll make a copy of what we've got there, and then for the next part I will just shrink that down a little bit to go on to our next former, and I'll make a copy of that so I'll be able to replicate that later, and that will come in and that will sit just there. So if I then press Control and collect the whole shape again, I can group those so that those two slots will stay where they are. And then what I want to do now is I'll use our straight line and I'll put our next former, and this will be the former that the motor sits on, and that will be right there. So if I just make a copy, and then if I shrink this down again further, so I'll make a copy of that one and just leave that there so that we can replicate it later, and I'll just put these two slots in place just where the motor bulkhead will have to sit, or the motor former. So I'll just move those forward until they touch that line right there. So I'll group those, and then if I bring that shape out now, what you can see is we're going to have a side panel that will key into our former, and the formers that are inside the aircraft coming down to the nose will key into those. And this one here will be the one that the motor mounts on, and then the motor of course will just sit in front of that, and the propeller will be out the front. So that's what we've done there with that side panel. Next, it's time to make the formers. So the first former that I'm going to make is this fuselage former number 1, and this is how I'll do it. I'll first of all put our side panel back where it comes from, where it belongs, and I'll just shift that into position. And then to create our former, all I'm going to do is make a shape, and it is going to be a rectangle, and I'm going to make sure that this line is in line with the edge of our former, and I'll do that by grabbing that line and just pulling it in till it snaps onto our other side sheet there. And then this top line, I want that corner to just touch or just be at the outer edge of this top line of the longeron, and that's that in place. Then if I come to the bottom and I grab hold of this, I can just shrink that down until it just touches our bottom line there. I now know that that is the correct height for this former. So if I press our full stop, which rotates that through 90 degrees, I can then bring it down and do exactly the same. So I want to line this line up with the edge of our former line and get this top corner here right on the outer corner of our line there. And then if I come to the bottom, I just grab this and I shrink it in until that line touches that, or till that corner touches that line there, and I now know that this shape is the correct size for our fuselage former, or fuselage former number 1. So if I press our full stop again, that'll turn back round, and I'll bring this back up and I'm going to put it back in place here, and I'll do that by grabbing this line and bringing it over till it snaps onto the other red line, and then using Control and Shift and the arrow keys, I just bring it up into place, and that looks absolutely spot on to me. So with that selected, if I press Control and then select the side panel as well, what I can do is I can bring them both over just like that. Now I saved this one from earlier, so I'm going to bring that down and I'm going to superimpose that on the tabs on our side panel, just like that. And what I know now is if I take our side panel away, I can cut those tabs out, and I know that that will slot together neatly with this side panel when it's turned at right angles, and that will assemble the fuselage nicely. So all I'm going to do is make another copy, Control C and then Control V, and I am going to superimpose that copy straight onto that one, the one that's already in place. And once I've done that, I can then take that straight across to the other side without going higher or lower, and I can now confidently cut these out. So if I ungroup and then I just pull that across, so without moving these bits inside here, I've just come across the line. That means our snipping tool will now work perfectly, and I can snip those pieces out, and then I can do exactly the same on the other side. So ungroup and then stretch that over the line so that it's crossing the line, get the snipping tool snip those out, and I now know that that former will perfectly fit that side, but of course the former will be at right angles, so it'll be going across, but it will fit perfectly when we come to assemble. Of course there's more to this former than that. What I'm going to do next is where the top edge comes in, or where the top longeron comes in, I'm going to cut small slots in there. So to do that, if I make a square and I make that 3.2 by 3.2, then what I can do is I can bring that down and I can put that right in the corner. I can copy that as well, control copy, and make another one for over there. And then if I select that, and without moving this inside square, if I take the top out higher up and the side further out, I can get my snipping tool and I can just cut that nice little shape there. And then next what I'm going to do is exactly the same here. If you grab the corner, by the way, put your cursor right on the corner, you can snap it into the corner, and it saves a little bit of time, a little bit of messing about. Grab the snipping tool, do the same there. And then at the bottom we're going to have exactly the same. We've got our longeron coming along the bottom there, and that's going to fit straight into this point here, and it will finish at that point. So we still need our square cut in, so I'll do that in exactly the same way. If I control V, I should still have the little square copied already. So I'll just push them to around about the right place. If I grab that corner and snap it to that corner, and then grab this corner and snap it to that corner, I can just very, very quickly put those in position and then just snip those corners out. Okay, so that is the start of our former. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to now cut a slot in the bottom, which is going to be the shape of our battery hatch. So the way I'm going to do that is, the battery that I've got is 20 millimeters thick, but it's then got some Velcro on either side, Velcro on the battery and then Velcro to hold it in place. So what I think we'll do is we'll make the battery hatch 35 millimeters deep at its lowest point, or its narrowest point. So if I make a shape here and we make that say 35 millimeters high, and then what I'll do is I'll then just put that onto our shape here, or onto our main plan, and if we have a look at that, it's just touching the bottom longeron there, and it's touching the bottom longeron just there. So I think that will be fine, and we'll probably need to cut this former, and this former, so that the battery can sit somewhere around there. Maybe this former won't need it, but probably just this former and this former, I think. So with that in mind, if I bring our former across and I sit it in place, and that's exactly in the right spot there, that's the height that I want our battery hatch to be. So The battery itself is 35mm wide, so to give a little bit of clearance either side, if I make a shape 45mm wide, that'll give us plenty of room to get the battery in. So all I'm going to do is bring that across, and I'm going to sit that straight on our former at the height of that line there. So that's set it to the right height. Now all I need to do is press Control and grab the former as well, and I can bring that across, and then all I want to do is gather both of those and then center that former by pressing that icon there. So I now know that that's the right depth and it's right in the center of my former. So if I get my snipping tool again and I just snip those bits out, that is going to provide the battery hatch at the bottom on this former when we come to assemble the aeroplane. So all I want to do now is probably just take a section out the top, because we don't want to be adding unnecessary weight. So if I make that 45mm wide, I can probably, if we maybe put a radius of 10mm on each of those corners, just like that. Now I'm not going to radius this bottom here, because I'll be putting a platform in there, and we'll actually be sticking the battery to the underside using Velcro and maybe a small strap, and so that's how we're going to do that. So I think to all intents and purposes that is former 1 completed. So if I just group to make sure that this top bit stays where it's supposed to, so we'll group, we will then name that former 1, but we'll just reduce the size of that of that right in there to 4mm, and I'll just put F1. And then when we come off there, I can change that to our engraving layer. I can change the outside to our cutting layer, and then I'll group those so that the engraving stays where it's supposed to be. And next I'll just add in a couple of tabs and I'll put one there, and I'll put one there, and I think that will do nicely. Okay, so that's former 1. What I'll do now, I'm going to leave that in place just there, because I'll use that to set the height of the cut on this former in front here. Now on the original plan this wasn't a former, there's only a former there and a former there, so you get former 1 and former 2, but because we've upscaled and we're going to have a motor sitting in the front, I'm going to make another former here, here and here. This one will be ply, this one will be ply, and so will the engine or the motor mount, that will be ply as well. So so what I'll do now is I'll get on with making the other formers, but like I say, I'll leave this in place so that it sets the height for our cutting for this former. So the next former should be much more straightforward. So if we make a shape, and all we're going to do, it's going to be this former here, and what I'm going to do, this on the original plan, this is former 1 and this is former 2 which go either side of, they're the wing supports on either end of the wing or either side of the wing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call these formers N1, N2 and N3. So nose 1, nose 2, nose 3. So to make this nose 3 or N3, it's just create our shape, and all I'm going to do is go from the top of our line there to the bottom of our line at the bottom and just create a shape like that. Now I'll change the colour just so that we can keep you know, so we can see it against the background of you know, of black and white. So I'll just drag that down to get that right on the bottom there. It's this corner here we want right on the line, which we have got, and this corner here is right on the line up there. So that's the correct height. So just spin it through 90 degrees by pressing our full stop, and we can bring it down and we can measure it against this former here. Now what we want to do on this one is we're coming to the inside of the blue line. Now the reason for that is our sides coming to the nose are going to be straight because they're going to be sheet balsa. So it's one of the little changes that we've made. So all I'm going to do is I want it in the center of this former here, and I want it to touch that blue line. So using Control and Shift, I'll move the whole shape until it's touching the blue line and it's right in the center, just there. Okay, so if we come to the bottom, what I want to do now is raise this up until this corner here, the red dotted corner, is just on that line there. So grab it's this central mark here. If I grab that, then I can just take that up until I'm on the inside of that blue line, just like that. Okay, so I now know that this dotted shape here is going to be exactly the right size for our former there. Now the other thing to bear in mind is I'll just press that, take that through 90 degrees again, press the full stop. The other thing to bear in mind is that there'll be no longeron up here, so I don't have to cut the little squares in the corners for the longerons. But what I do have to do is add tabs to come through this these slots that I'm going to cut in the side panels here. So all I'm going to do with this is if I take it up and I just want to put it right on the lines here. I want this corner to be touching the line there, this corner to be touching the line down there. So if I just Control Shift and use my arrow keys, I can get that exactly in line. And so you can see that the measurements that we've done from the plan when we've been lining it up with the lines, they've come out absolutely spot on as to where we want to be. So next I'll take this this little shape that we'd saved earlier, and I'm going to superimpose that onto the shapes that we've got for the slots. So if I just bring that down, that is now superimposed onto those slots. So I know that in relation to this former, they are going to be in exactly the right place. So leaving those selected, I'm going to press Control and then select the former as well, and then I'll just bring them all out just like that. Then if I click on the two shapes and then I copy those, then what I want to do with those is again bring them down and superimpose them right onto those shapes there. And the best way to do that is to grab a corner and drag it to the corner. It'll snap in place just like that. So all I need to do with that now is press Control. Don't need Shift, because if you just press Control you move 1 millimeter at a time. If you press Control and Shift like I have done now, you move 1/10 of a millimeter at a time. So I'm just going to put that onto the outside of our shape, and I'm going to do exactly the same with the other side. Press Control and Shift and just move it so that the edge is just touching the outside of our shape like that. And now I know that they would be in exactly the right place to provide tabs for both sides here. So all I need to do is grab hold of those and pull it across the line so we can use our snipping tool. Then I need to ungroup, otherwise the snipping tool won't work. Grab the snipping tool and take away the bits that I do not want, just like that. And then do exactly the same with the other side. Come inside, then ungroup, grab the snipping tool, and that's the shape, the overall shape of that former now made. So next I just want to cut our piece into the bottom of the former. So we make a 45 millimeter wide shape. 45 millimeters, and we'll just put that onto our shape there. And then if we group them both, or grab them both, we won't group them, and we bring them across, I'll put that corner right back to the top where it needs to be, and then all I want to do is move this shape up until it reaches the line that we decided would be our the depth coming from the bottom, or the height of our hatch for our battery. So with that still selected, if I press Control and I then select the former, we can drag them both out, get our snipping tool and just take away the bits that we don't want, and we've now got our second former, which will also be plywood, the shape, and also the shape for the battery housing, or the battery hatch. Just there. Okay, so if we now we can make a another shape. So I think that will be about right. If I also intend to engrave this, if I put in N3, so nose former 3, and then I collect all of these, and then I can center them all just like that. And so that's all now nice and centered. What I also think I'll do is I'll put our radiuses onto the corners of this top shape, and then next thing will be for me to change that to our engraving layer, change the former and the former cutout to our cutting layer, and then group, and we've made our next former. Okay, So that's how I'm going to do the rest of the formers. I'll show you how I do the nose former or the mounting for the motor. I'll show you how I do that in just a while. But before I do that, I will just make a couple of adjustments to this side plate. Now, one of the things that we know is that with it having a top mounted wing, when the propeller pulls the plane forward, any drag on the wing will cause the nose to come up, and so the aeroplane will start to climb involuntarily. So normally you would have a little bit of down thrust on the propeller. So we're going to alter this. Now on the original plan it says a 2-degree downturn. Now I don't know how you measure a 2-degree downturn just without tools. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a line like that, and then I'm going to make sure that that is perfectly upright by selecting nodes, hover over it, press A. So I'm going to bring that over and align it with our slots, which are going to mount our former for the engine mounting. So I've put that on there. Now what I've also got down here is I've got this protractor. This protractor is it's an online protractor and it's a see-through one. So what I can do is if I press full stop, I can turn that on its side, and then I can bring this dot, bring the centre of the protractor right up until it's on the centre of our two slots there. If I bring the top of our line down until that's right at the centre, and then if I go to nodes and I grab this node at the bottom and move that to the 2-degree mark, that gives me a line that has a 2-degree offset. So if I bring the protractor out of the way, I now know that this line here is set at 2 degrees. So all I need to do is arrive or get this line to touch this top corner here, just like that, and then if I ungroup and all I want to do is get this to exactly the same angle as we have with our line, and I think that's about right, but we'll just move this in. Okay, I think we now have a 2-degree downturn on our motor. We also need to offset our motor to the right slightly, and the reason for this is the torque effect will tend to make the aeroplane tilt to the left, which will cause it to fly to the left. So so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy our size sheet for the nose, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ungroup just this one, and then I'm going to select our slots that mount the nose mounting, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control and Shift, and I'm going to take this 1 millimeter towards the rear. So now that's done, I'm going to regroup, and when we superimpose this onto the other shape, you'll see that we've now offset our slots, so the motor will tilt around about 1 to 2 degrees to the right. So what I'm going to do now that we've done that is I've got to mark this up. So this has got to be the right hand side. So all I'm going to do is put on that an R, and then I'll put on the other one an L, just so that we don't have any confusion later on. And then what I can do is group those, and that's our motor offset sorted out. So when we come to assemble the aircraft, or when we come to build the aircraft, it will just automatically go into that orientation. So I've just made, off camera, I've just made this this former here, which would sit right there on the plan, and we'll fasten into our side components just there into these slots here. So just there like that. Now that one's going to be made out of balsa, not out of ply, so I'm going to sit that here with these other two components which are waiting for more balsa components, so I can make up another sheet. So the last thing to do would be to make our engine mounting, or our motor mount former, which is going to go right in these slots here. So to do that, all I'm going to do is come up here to where our blue line is. Now this blue line, remember, is at the back of our motor, which is this red square here, and I'm going to make our shape right there. Now that needs to be at the top of our line there, and at the bottom of our line there, so that'll be about the right size where we have that, or where it is. So I just flip that round and then bring it down, and we can just set that so that it is the same size, so it just fits between the inner blue line here and the inner blue line there. So I'll just move that over slightly, and then I'll bring this, the bottom up, so it's just inside that blue line, or just touching that blue line there. Okay, so that is the size that our engine mounting, or our motor mounting former, is going to be. So if I flip that round, now the next thing we need to do is we need to put our tabs on. Now this one, you'll remember, is just a little bit different because it's now at an angle. In order to do this, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to use this copy of the slots up here to make our tabs on the side. But before I can do that, what I've got to do is I've got to make sure that we are still the correct size. So because with this being at an angle, you can understand that this is now going to be a longer distance than if it was upright and it was going from the shortest, or taking the shortest route across. So I'll just turn that on its side slightly until we're parallel here, and that looks perfect to me. So if I get into the center of those, now what I need to do is I'm going to need to just move up slightly, and you can see that I'm no longer reaching the top there. So all I'm going to do is measure this distance here, and that is 2.23 millimeters, so 2.2 mil. And then what I'm going to do is I have to turn this back upright, because if I stretch this, it'll distort the square. I'll show you what I mean by that. if I were to stretch this, you can see how that's turning away from being a square. So what I want to do now is go to nodes, hover over this, press A, so that's now upright, and now all I need to do is increase the size of that by 2.23 millimeters. So our height at the moment is 63.370. So if I go to 65.6, so 65.6, so I've just altered that length slightly, so I'll bring that back down now, and we will spin that round a little bit and just check that we're still spot on. Move that to the centre of those, and you can see that now at that angle we are the right length. I'll bring those down, and I'll change those until they're superimposed just like that. With those selected, I'll control and select, so that we've now got both of those. And now if I move to nodes and hover over this edge, press A, that will become upright. Which means I can now copy and paste our two tabs, superimpose those, and the best way to do that is to grab the corner and just take that to that corner. It'll snap into place, and then I can bring that across to the other side, just like we've done with the other formers. And just like that. So all we need to do now is stretch those in, stretch those so that they come over across the line, then ungroup and ungroup these, and then with our snipping tool I can just take away the bits that we don't want. Just like that. Now we know that that nose or that engine mount will fit absolutely perfectly at this angle inside there, and it will adopt the correct angle for us. So the next thing to do is I'll quickly go to our contester files, which was the aeroplane that we made some time ago, and in there I've got this nose that we made up at the time, and it's got the configuration for the screws that will fit into the back of the small 2212 motors. And there's also a little slot here at the bottom which allows us to feed the wires through to the back. So what I'm going to do is I'll just make a quick copy of that, and then I will go back to our file, and I'll bring in our copy that we've just made, and then all I'm going to do is ungroup that, and then I'll be able to take away the contester shape, which we do not need. And then if I bring that in, and then all I'm going to do, if I group that, the shape that is, then what I'll be able to do is, using this icon here, center that perfectly in our shape, right in the center there, and I can now group that and then change it to our cutting layer, So that's the last of our nose formers completed. I've just labelled this and put the tabs in off camera. I'll drop that down to where our other nose formers are down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the video there. So it'll be in the next video that I complete the formers for the fuselage, make any other shapes up that we want, and then I'll do the tail plane and the fin, and we'll get all the components completed. That'll be in the next video. So don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.